Another well-known scheme is one that involves a Nigerian prince. It's been going on since even before the internet was a thing, but now the game has changed.
Hundreds, thousands of people out there who have been defrauded.
And he says those mind games are used by the area more than countries like Russia or China, who have more of a technical or scientific approach.
Imagine for a moment that it is the year 1898. You are a wealthy merchant living in London, or perhaps a banker in New York. You are sitting in your study, illuminated by the warm glow of a gas lamp, when your butler arrives with the evening post. There, buried beneath the bills and the invitations to dull dinner parties, is an envelope. It looks different. It feels different. The paper is heavy, textured, expensive. There is a foreign stamp on the corner, Spain, and on the back, a thick red wax seal that has been stamped with a crest you almost recognize, but not quite. You open it. The handwriting inside is elegant, frantic, and desperate. "My dear sir," it begins, "I am writing to you under the strictest of confidence. I am a banker, currently imprisoned in a military fortress in Barcelona. I am a political prisoner, dying in this cell. But before I was captured, I managed to hide a trunk containing 30,000 pounds in gold and securities in a secret compartment of my luggage." The letter goes on. The prisoner has a beautiful young daughter who has been left destitute. He needs an honest man, a man of reputation like you, to travel to Spain, pay a small fine to the corrupt guards to release the luggage, and secure the safety of his daughter. In exchange for your help, you will receive a third of the fortune. Your heart starts to beat a little faster. You look around the room to make sure no one is watching. You aren't just reading a letter. You have been chosen. You have been pulled into a world of international espionage, damsels in distress, and buried treasure. You rush to your desk to write a reply. You are about to send money to a man you have never met for a fortune that does not exist. You think you are looking at history, but you aren't. You are looking at the exact same script that lands in your spam folder today. We call it the Nigerian Prince scam. The police call it advance fee fraud. But in the shadowy underworld of the 19th century, it had a different name. It was called the Spanish prisoner. And the story of how this scam conquered the world isn't about technology. It isn't about the internet. It is a story about the one thing that hasn't changed in 200 years, the bugs in the human operating system. This is the true story of the longest con in history. Before we travel back to the 19th century, we have to address the elephant in the room. When I say Nigerian Prince scam, you probably laugh. It has become a meme, a punchline. We picture broken English, excessive use of capital letters, and ridiculous stories about astronauts left on secret space stations, or princes who have lost the keys to the royal vault. We look at these emails and we think, who falls for this? You would have to be an idiot to click that link. But that arrogance is exactly what the scammers are counting on. There is a fascinating paper written by a researcher named Cormac Hurley from Microsoft Research. He asked a simple question: why are these scams so obvious? Why don't the scammers use perfect grammar? Why don't they write smarter scripts? The answer is brilliant and terrifying. They make the emails look stupid on purpose. It is a filtering mechanism. If you are the kind of person who reads a poorly written email about a Nigerian prince and hits delete, the scammer doesn't want to talk to you. You ask too many questions. You are too much work. By making the initial pitch ridiculous, they filter out the skeptics immediately. The only people who reply are the most vulnerable, the most gullible, or the most desperate. It saves the scammer time. But in the 1800s, things were different. The scammers didn't need to filter out millions of people. They were targeting the elite. They were hunting whales. And to catch a whale in the Victorian era, you needed a script that was nothing short of a masterpiece. To understand how this started, we have to look at the world of 1898. It was a time remarkably similar to our own. The world was globalizing. The telegraph was shrinking the distance between nations. Information was moving faster than ever before. And just like the early days of the internet, people were naive. They trusted the system. They trusted the mail. If a letter arrived at your house with a wax seal, you didn't think spam. You thought importance. And in the chaotic political landscape of Spain, a group of criminal geniuses saw an opportunity. They realized that they could sell a story that was too good to be true to men who were too arrogant to believe they could be fooled. The Spanish prisoner confidence trick didn't pop up out of nowhere. It was born from the chaos of the Carlist Wars and the Spanish-American War. Spain in the late 19th century was a turbulent place. Governments were rising and falling. Generals were being imprisoned. The newspapers in London and New York were full of stories about Spanish political unrest. This provided the perfect narrative cover for the scammers. When a victim received a letter claiming to be from a fallen general or a disgraced banker imprisoned in a Spanish dungeon, it felt plausible. It tracked with the headlines of the day. Let's break down the anatomy of the scam, because it is frighteningly sophisticated. The scammers, usually operating out of cities like Barcelona or Madrid, would obtain copies of Who's Who directories from England and America. These books were lists of wealthy, influential people. They gave the scammers names, addresses, and importantly, the egos of their victims. They would then employ scribes. These were men with beautiful penmanship and a command of formal, flowery English or French. They would sit in candlelit rooms, writing hundreds of letters by hand. The narrative was always the same, with slight variations. The writer was always a man of high status, a distant relative, a general, or a banker. He had been imprisoned for a crime he didn't commit. He was dying, but he had a secret. Usually, the secret involved a hidden trunk. This trunk was allegedly checked into a luggage depot at a railway station or a customs house. Inside the trunk was a massive fortune. Sometimes it was gold, sometimes bearer bonds, sometimes cash. But here is where the hook digs in. The prisoner couldn't access it. He still had the baggage receipt, the ticket needed to claim the trunk, hidden in his cell. But if the guards found it, they would steal the fortune. He needed a proxy. He needed you. The letter would stroke the victim's ego. "I have heard of your honorable reputation," it would say. "I can trust no one else." The ask was simple. The victim needed to send money, not for the prisoner. Oh no, the prisoner was a gentleman, but to bribe the guards, or to pay the shipping costs, or to settle a legal fee to get the trunk released. Once the trunk was retrieved, the victim would be given 25% or 30% of the contents, a return on investment of 10,000%. But the scammers knew that greed wasn't enough. Greed is a powerful motivator, but it makes people suspicious. They needed something to bypass the brain's logic centers. They needed emotion. So they introduced the daughter. Almost every Spanish prisoner letter mentioned a beautiful, innocent daughter. She was usually named Maria or Isabella. She was in danger. Without the money, she would be thrown onto the streets, or worse. This changed the dynamic completely. The victim wasn't just an investor anymore. He was a hero. He wasn't just buying gold. He was saving a damsel in distress. It turned a financial transaction into a romantic adventure. It was the ultimate psychological cocktail: greed, vanity, and heroism. And men, wealthy, educated, successful men, fell for it in droves. You might be thinking, surely they would verify this. You have to remember, there was no Google. You couldn't type General Rodrigo Spain prison into a search bar. To verify the story, you would have to travel to Spain, and some people did. This is where the scam moves from clever to absolute genius. The scammers were prepared for the skeptics. If a victim replied to the first letter showing interest but asking for proof, the scammers would send a second artifact. They would send a newspaper clipping. It looked real. It felt like newsprint. It contained a story about the arrest of the very general mentioned in the letter.
The catch? The scammers had printed the newspaper themselves. They created fake issues of real Spanish newspapers, inserted their own stories, and mailed them to the victims. It was 19th century fake news in its most literal form. If the victim was still on the fence, the scammers would invite them to Spain. Imagine the audacity. You are a criminal, and you invite the victim to come to your city. When the victim arrived in Madrid or Barcelona, they wouldn't meet the prisoner, of course. The prisoner was in solitary confinement. Instead, they would meet the prison chaplain or the family lawyer. These roles were played by the con men. They would meet the victim in a legitimate-looking office. They would show them official-looking documents with government stamps. They would even take them to the outside of a real prison and point to a high window. "He is in there," they would whisper. "He is praying for your help." At this point, the victim is physically present. They have invested time and travel expenses. The sunk cost fallacy kicks in. They are desperate for the story to be true. So, they hand over the cash. The priest or lawyer would take the money, promising to bribe the guard and bring the luggage receipt to the hotel the next morning. The victim would return to their hotel room. They would wait, and wait, and wait. Morning would come. No priest, no lawyer, no luggage receipt. When they finally went to the police, they would realize the truth. There was no prisoner, there was no daughter, there was no trunk of gold. But here is the sad reality of the Spanish prisoner scam. Most victims never went to the police. Why? Because they were embarrassed. Imagine being a respected London banker. You have just traveled to Spain to smuggle money out of the country for a criminal, based on a letter from a stranger, hoping to marry a non-existent 18-year-old girl. To report the crime is to admit to the world that you are a greedy, gullible fool. The scammers knew this. They relied on the victim's silence. The shame was their security system. The Spanish prisoner scam was so successful that it became an industry. By the early 1900s, the French and British post offices were intercepting tens of thousands of these letters every year. In 1914, just before World War I, the scam was generating the equivalent of millions of dollars in modern currency. But what is truly remarkable is how the scam survived the 20th century. Most crimes die out when technology changes. Highway robbery disappeared when we stopped riding carriages. Safe cracking became harder with digital alarms. But the Spanish prisoner didn't die, it evolved. When the Spanish Civil War ended and things stabilized in Europe, the scam went dormant for a while. It popped up here and there, sometimes known as the Vietnamese trunk or the Jewish escapee during World War II. It always adapted to the current crisis. Wherever there was chaos, there was the scam. But in the 1980s, the scam found a new home. A home that would give it its modern name and make it famous worldwide: Nigeria. To understand why Nigeria became the epicenter, we have to look at the economics of the 1980s. Nigeria is a country of immense potential. It is rich in oil. During the 1970s, the country experienced an oil boom. Money was flowing. The government invested heavily in education. This created a generation of highly educated, English-speaking young people. They were smart, capable, and ambitious. But in the 1980s, oil prices collapsed. The economy tanked. Suddenly, you had millions of educated, English-speaking people with no jobs and no prospects. You had a corrupt military government, and you had a lack of legitimate ways to make money. It was the perfect petri dish for the virus to mutate. Some resourceful criminals in Lagos rediscovered the old Spanish prisoner trick, but they updated the script for the corporate age.
Instead of a prisoner in a castle, the protagonist became a prince, a government official, or an executive at the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation. Instead of a luggage trunk, the prize became a frozen bank account or an over-invoiced contract. The pitch was tailored for the greed of the 1980s business world. The letters were sent via fax machines to businesses in America and Europe. "We need to move $25 million out of the country," the fax would say. "We need a foreign bank account to park the money. If you let us use your account, you keep 30%. It was the exact same mechanism as 1898, the advance fee. Once the victim bit the hook, the fees would start. "We need $10,000 for the transfer tax. We need $5,000 for the lawyer. We need a bribe for the central bank governor." The victims paid and paid and paid. The Nigerian Criminal Code for fraud is section 419. And so, the 419 scam was born. It is easy to look at the statistics, billions of dollars lost annually, but the real story is in the human devastation. There is a concept in psychology called the suspension of disbelief. It's what happens when you watch a movie. You know Superman isn't real, but you allow yourself to believe it for 2 hours so you can enjoy the story. This scam hacks that part of the brain. But for the victims, the movie never ends. I want to tell you about a man named Dr. John. That's not his real name. He was a neurosurgeon in California, a brilliant man, a man who saved lives for a living. In 2006, he received an email. It wasn't about a prince. It was about a refugee fund that needed to be moved to the US to build a hospital. Dr. John wasn't greedy. He wanted to help. He wanted to build that hospital. He started talking to the scammers. They sent him blueprints. They sent him photos of the land. They spoke to him on the phone every day for months. They became his friends. Over the course of 2 years, Dr. John sent them his life savings. Then he mortgaged his house. Then he borrowed money from his family. In total, he lost $3 million. When the FBI finally sat him down and told him it was a scam, he refused to believe them. He got angry at the agents. He told them they were interfering with a humanitarian mission. This is the darkest part of the scam. It doesn't just steal your money, it steals your reality. To admit you have been scammed is to shatter your own identity. It is easier to believe the lie than to face the truth. This is why the scam works. It exploits our best qualities, our desire to be helpful, our desire to be heroes, and twists them against us. And the scammers? They have no remorse. In interviews with 419 scammers in Lagos, often called Yahoo Boys, they view the crime as a form of reparations. They argue that the West stole from Africa for centuries during colonialism, and now they are just using their wits to take it back. They see themselves as Robin Hoods, even if they are stealing from grandmothers in Kansas. It is a war of narratives, and the victims are the casualties. So, here we are. It is the 21st century. We have artificial intelligence, blockchain, and quantum computing. And yet, if you check your spam folder right now, I guarantee you will find a descendant of the Spanish prisoner. The wax seal is gone. The handwritten parchment is gone. Now, it's a DM on Instagram. It's a message on WhatsApp. It's a fake profile on a dating app asking for money to fix a car. The pig butchering scams coming out of Southeast Asia today? That is just the Spanish prisoner with a crypto wallet. The specific details change, but the core engine is the same. It is a script that runs on the hardware of the human brain. We want to believe we are special. We want to believe in secret fortunes. We want to believe that we have been chosen. The Spanish prisoner of 1898 teaches us a humbling lesson. We are not smarter than our ancestors. We are just as vulnerable to a good story. As long as there are people who dream of easy money, and as long as there are people who dream of being a hero, there will always be a prisoner, a castle, and a trunk full of gold waiting just out of reach. The medium changes. The lie remains the same. The next time you get a suspicious text message or a weird email, don't just laugh at it. Take a second to appreciate the history. You are looking at a fossil. You are looking at a ghost from the Victorian era that has learned how to use a smartphone. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the history of deception, you might be wondering, if this was the biggest scam of the 19th century, what is the biggest scam happening right now? I've actually done a full investigation into a modern scam that is stealing billions, and it's not hidden in your spam folder. It's probably installed on your phone right now. You can click this video right here to find out what it is. Stay safe, stay skeptical, and I'll see you in the next one.